I remember first hearing about you guys, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago maybe. There was this weird group with the offensive name. They were playing these weird, sweaty parties. And there were song after song, split 7 inches, cassettes, 12-inch singles, reel-to-reel tapes, all this kind of weird stuff. And I thought, man, this is hardcore. This is cool. This is Toronto. This is something that nobody else has. But I'm thinking, my, how times have changed.
Yeah. Well, like, I kind of think for me it's still the same thing, but I think that's because I've had a very insider view of what's gone on. But yeah, like it's been 10 years, and there's like been a lot of changes in I think all of our personal lives in the last 10 years too. So I think that's only reflected by the band now.
I mean, the band itself is not going to stop doing these sort of like ambitious and vexing projects for people to collect, and I think that if you think that hard to find things and difficult little endeavors like that is hardcore, then we are as hardcore as they come. I mean, that's not going to slow down.
Can I just run over some of the things that have happened recently?
Fire away.
Sure.
Okay. Polaris Music Prize. Some of your music made it onto American Network TV through Friday Night Lights. You have been on Fox News as a commentator and opinion generator.
Yes.
You're now the host of The Wedge on Much Music. You appeared on Newlywed, Nearly Dead.
That was a mistake. That's when I learned the cold hard truth about reality TV, that it is a lot more staged than you would be led to believe. And I know everyone's like, I know it's staged, but trust me, when those cameras are in front of you, if you're me, you act a fool and totally forget that it's staged and totally forget that they're going to find everything to make you look bad. And that's what I did. So if you ever seen Newlywed, Nearly Dead, I assure you, I never let those records actually out of my possession. They take my records away at one point. Believe me, they were never taken away. That was for TV. And I'm not that bad of a person. And I do share my pizza with my wife, unlike I said on camera. That thing.
More recently, this album streamed on National Public Radio in the United States. Stayed boring, talking very quietly and very, very calmly.
We're going to be the reason they gave their funding cut.
No,
like we just gave them the reason.
I think it says more about our band than anything. This record is the calm, staid, boring statement of 2011.
Feature in the New York Times. You took on Rolling Stone in a magazine in a lawsuit and almost won.
Yeah. We won actually, but we lost on appeal for the first chart. And then we realized that lawyers don't work for free. And our lawyer was like, yeah, I'm going to not do this anymore. And we're like, okay. And we're
not many times in life when you lose a battle and you can just say, do it again, do it again.
Do it again, yeah.
Opening for the Foo Fighters, a couple of
Coming
shows
up.
this summer.
Coming up.
And a band from Toronto called Fucked Up is on the front page of the Globe and Mail Arts section, where they don't do F dash dash.
No.
Up. Globe and Mail writes it out, always has, Fucked Up. So that's pretty cool.
The Globe and Mail is actually, we've had a long relationship with that paper. They were the first reason they're the reason we got stopped at the border and were denied entry to the U.S. and the reason we had to go legit as a band and start getting visas and working with booking agents, because they refused to print our punk names and they used our real names. And we went to cross the border and they Googled our real names. They're very savvy at that border, I assure you. If
Which border is this?
The Canadian-American border.
No,
Sorry.
which
I think
crossing?
it was Queenston-Lewiston.
Okay.
Queenston-Lewiston. Yeah, so if you're in a band and you're ever going to play across the border or do any sort of work illegally across the border,
Keep
make
your
sure
names out of the Globe and Mail.
don't post it on Twitter because they will find it and then they will be screwed, like we were. So Globe and Mail still,
You've had border crossing problems before. Sandy was telling me of an issue that you had between Manitoba and North Dakota.
Yeah.
And you had the toy gun.
I had a toy gun. The best is they're like, do any of you guys have a gun in your bag? And we're all like, no. And I'm like, oh shit, that gun I bought in San Francisco, and it was like one of those airsoft guns that shoots plastic pellets. Like it wasn't very real looking, but then I'm like, I have a plastic gun in my bag, and the guy's like, which bag? And I can't see because the door's blocking. So I'm like, and I go to Seb. He's like, get away from the bags! Get away from the bags! So. Yeah, we've had some dodgy borders, but not like for a band called Fucked Up. We've skated off pretty easy.
Customs and Border Patrol generally are very good humored about the name.
Yeah,
F'd Up.
very good humor.
I can say Fucked Up. I see. We've been completely trained to clip our tongues a little bit and say effed. I just say effed up the long version, and they get the idea. But every border guard generally is sympathetic to a band that has to live with a name like that. And we've only gotten a few lectures, I think, in our time.
I've lied and said I played in Broken Social Scene, too. Like, for real. And then one time I did it, and they pulled us in, and I'm like, oh, my God, they're going to catch me in this lie. But luckily, they just wanted to search my bag, and they didn't care that I really wasn't Kevin
I'm just
Drew.
waiting for the Westboro Baptist Church to show up at one of your gigs.
I would love that. I would love those people to show up, because let me tell you what feels better than anything, a wet, sweaty hug from me. That'll cure your homophobia, my friend. That'll cure your hate.
They're going to protest Taking Back Sunday show in Seattle later this month.
Really?
Yeah, and they did a Less Than Jake show.
They are so far behind the times. Like, are they reading AP from like 1997?
This new thing called emo.
Yeah, they're like, we've got these big plans this summer. Guttermouth, you're next. It's like all the bands are like. Meanwhile, all the other bands are like, oh, okay, we're free.
Back to the band name. How's your dad doing? Wikipedia says that it makes him throw up.
He seems to have quelled the nausea at this point, and he's okay, actually. I feel funny talking about the guy because he's a very private fella, but he definitely had a trouble with the name. And I think anybody who might be a parent out there can sort of sympathize with the protective side of things. So he definitely hated it. He assumed that meant I was fraternizing with I think he said the words bikers and prostitutes and everything bad in the world. Of course, he's seen the band now. He's met everybody in the band, and he's just fine.
He met us all before he said that.
But all he saw was guys in leather vests and chains.
So this album is certainly one of the most anticipated records in Canada this year and across the United States and places in the world. I mean, again, this is a band that was put together, a bunch of misfits.
Thanks, Alan.
We're just misfit for each other, not for the world.
With a super offensive name, and now you're just like this indie phenomenon.
Yeah, it goes to show you that anyone can wind up in a band. Like, I literally cannot stress this enough. Like, 1979 was when music got really interesting because that's like the DIY explosion happened, and I think that's when anyone can be in a band and anyone can be doing this.
And I think that's when there was like the legitimization of the variable as something in rock music. Everybody has heard a story about a rock star being crazy or being wild, that you sort of act up in a typical way. And DIY in the late 70s was all about the variables and about things that were completely unexpected working. And so, I mean, in a way, that's a way for us to connect ourselves to that first punk spark, is that we represent a group of complete variables.
I was just going to say we're really lucky and that we're just falling in that line of amateur musicians. And I shouldn't say amateur musicians. I'm a very amateur musician surrounded by a lot of very talented people. Then they carry me.
So let's get into the album a little bit here. It's interesting that you would put together a rock opera, a concept album, when rock operas and concept albums are one of the things that conjured punk into being back in the late 70s.
Oh, absolutely. But I kind of think, one of the big problems when the original punk, well, not the original punk, but sorry, when the English first wave punk explosion happened, was they kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, 70s rock had become overindulgent and was just bloated and had to be destroyed. But there was a lot of great stuff that was in there. And, like throwing out an entire duration of songs, like long songs, for instance, because they're not punk, I think, kind of misses the point. Like, I think a lot of the great stuff that was coming around that time, like the Television Personalities and Punishment of Luxury and bands like that, it definitely had like a real prog psychedelic kind of influence running throughout them.
And stateside bands like the Wipers in the late 70s and early 80s were writing really atypical punk music that was quite long format and touches on some of the same things that we're doing. Not the same way we are necessarily.
And, of course, Husker Du.
And Husker Du. I was just going to say, is Zen Arcade.
Zen Arcade. And there's the second Sham 69 record.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a literal rock opera.
That is a literal rock opera.
But these are all narrative projects in a sort of unnarrative place.
I'm not going to say we've made a successful rock opera, but I think our benchmark is if it's slightly more successful than the disastrous Sham 69 one, then we're doing okay.
Now, most of this music, let's just talk about the shambolic nature of this rock opera. Most of the music was written before you actually decided that this was a rock opera.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain?
Well, no, we knew it was going to be a rock opera. We just didn't have a plot.
Yeah,
which I guess is sort of key when you start writing a rock opera.
The giants, Mozart, Pete Townsend, start with a libretto.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Work way around.
We're kind of that way as well, I guess.
Well, you know what? We always write this way. We start with the music, and then things get built on top of it. And I guess that includes a narrative. So in a way, we wrote a record that had to have a rock opera smashed on top of it. And so this, instead of the story and the music coinciding, it was just sort of they had to meet each other and love each other no matter what.
Well, no, I think actually we probably actually wrote the lyrics. 'Cause I remember when we were sitting down writing it. I remember we were sitting there and we were plotting it out, and they were like, and Mike and Josh were like, okay, so this song's got high energy, so what do we need for this kind of vibe? And we were kind of plotting it almost based on the music, like pacing the story to kind of fit to the record that had been written and things like that. So it was kind of like, yeah, like I think the music definitely dictated the words in our case, but that's kind of, yeah, as Jonas said, that's been the way all along. Like I've never come into practice being like, yo, I've got some great licks for my vocals. You guys follow me. This is an E.
You know that it's gone really crazy when the words falsetto are starting to come into play. So we'd save that one for the next decade, maybe.
I heard someplace that you recorded 300 minutes worth of music.
Yeah, supposedly if you take all that, all the music we recorded, all the singles, and You're the Tiger, which is coming out, which we recorded at the same time, and
David's Town
comp.
And West of Zanzibar, where we scored a movie, a silent film, as part of the Images Festival. It
all becomes 300 minutes.
And where's that music going to go? Where can we get it?
Some of it's coming out as singles. The LP came out today. The singles are going to be coming out kind of shortly thereafter. The David's Town comp came out on Record Store Day. You're the Tiger's coming out soonish. I got to finish vocals. But Jim Jarmusch is doing vocals on it too. Really? Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You track this stuff. It sounds fantastic.
He's got like this really great deep voice, and we were kind of like, Mike and I were like in the studio doing vocals for it, and we're like, who'd be good to get? And I'm like, it'd be cool if we got Jim Jarmusch because he's got such a cool deep voice. And Shane, the guy who was producing our record, plays in a band with Jim Jarmusch, and was like, yeah, we can get him. So that's gonna, and then we have the West of Zanzibar you guys recorded, and I think they're looking at ways of getting it out.
Is this the first time that we've heard female vocals on a Fucked Up record?
No, there's always been female vocals. Oh, no. First LP, I think, was the first time we used it because it was just like, I can't do it. You know, I love vocals as being like paints, you know, and I'm the color bright fuchsia. And, you know, sometimes bright fuchsia does not look pretty. So sometimes you need another blue to go in there as well.
Now, one of the things I asked you guys to do is pick out some songs from the record that we can talk about. And I've got them here. We can play a little excerpt of them.
Sure.
Give me one.
One song?
Well, one of four for now. We'll stop every once in a while and play some music.
Okay. Why don't you go?
Okay. I will pick, my favorite song on the LP is called Runnin' on Nothing.
Okay, tell us about this.
This starts with this kind of plucky, airy guitar line that sort of, it follows, I remember when we were writing this song, I thought it sort of followed a typical sounding pattern, but as with everything in Fucked Up, whatever sounds typical when we start to write it never ends up the same way when it's finally on paper. And this is one of those songs on this record where I think we were kind of tugging at our shirt collars a bit, thinking it might be too far away from the regular F'd Up. It's got an unbelievably anthemic rock and roll, almost like 70s FM radio. This could be no, it couldn't really be, but I was going to say it could be a Lost Rubettes track or something like that. But this has it's a big chorus. It's got a really driving verse. I play some amazing drum fills in it. And I think it's just one of the songs on the record that was executed the best and came out really well.
Okay, so let's play a minute or so of that.
Okay.
Just get a taste of it. Here it is. This is Fucked Up with Running on Nothing.
Bet you're thinking you've heard that riff before.
I wrote this one. The lyrics, I mean, not the music. I can't write music. This also puts a hole in Mike's argument that he's never heard The Who, because this is the most obvious Who-influenced song on the record. This part I had visioned like completely like a rock opera. Like this part would be like looking at the audience direct address. Like this would be like a really rock opera moment right here. And this right here, like you can see Pete Townsend doing the windmill right now.
But more accurately, you can see the 3 guitar players that are actually in F fucked up doing something completely different and original.
Not influenced by The Who at all.
See, the good thing about this, too, is that for a song with a lot of layers, it's sort of thin at the moment, and there's 4 or 5 parts playing off each other, and you can sort of tell because they just sort of ring in your ear. And then a few minutes, you'll catch it when it comes to the sort of pre-chorus. Everything kicks in at once, and it lands really hard. And Damien, actually, you sing in this song, whether you know it or not.
I do kind of sing in this song.
Now there's about 11 guitars playing right now.
And right now, I kind of like to, not to keep being the Who thing to death, but when I heard this thing, I'm like, oh, this is cool to have Pete Townsend singing. So when I hear that part in my head, I just hear Pete Townsend singing.
I kind of heard Robert Pollard singing this song from Guided by Voices.
Oh, for a second there, I thought you meant Robert Pollard.
No.
I'm like, whoa, why? Anyway.
Also, the working title for this song was Who Thing.
Yeah, the working, so you can't get more obvious with the Who influence than that.
All right, pull the plug on this one.
All right, there we go. We'll come back to more songs later.
We're going to unravel the whole record. This is not going to be an interview. This is going to be...
Well, there are tons and tons of riffs on this record. I mean, my favorite tracks are, I think, Ship of Fools, because that's got that search and destroy feel.
That definitely, I think the same thing. It's got a search and destroy kind of vibe.
I woke up this morning at 2 o'clock with The Other Shoe going off in my head over and over and over and over again, and I wanted to kill somebody.
That's how you know you've made it, when you can drive people to insanity with the nauseating music that you make.
And then I was there. It's got the really cool guitar interplay.
I think it's like a backwards guitar thing, isn't it?
The riff sort of starts one way, and you think it's going to continue in that way, and the rest of the band comes in opposite. And there's also 2 drum tracks, one playing forward and one playing its inverse, and that's going off of each other in stereo. So there's a lot of...
What do you mean inverse?
So the first drum track is going doop doop chick doop 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 ch, and the second track is doing its inverse. So jack doop 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 jack, and so the 2 are happening simultaneously. So it's sort of like a pendulum effect, just the way the guitars are.
You hashed out the narrative with David and his girlfriend and her communist leanings at the food court in the Dufferin Mall.
Yeah, it's a creative mecca.
What were you eating?
I had New York fries, and I'm not getting paid to say that. I'm just that much of a fan. That plug was free. I'd love some coupons. And Mike had a smoothie, and I don't think Josh. Did you even eat anything? You drank coffee. And we sat there and surrounded by kids from high schools, and the Dufferin Mall, if you haven't been, is not one of our finest malls in Toronto. It's not as bad as it was, but it's still not great. So it's mainly the food court is occupied by older people, which I'm sure most malls have, but these are particularly aggressive older people that will not give up table space for no one. And we had a lot of tables taken up with our little mess. So
now, David's story is set... What, the early 80s?
Late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the best thing about making up a town. And that's why I guess we decided to make up a town so we wouldn't be slave to history.
Now, was anybody in the band even born during the Thatcher-Reagan era?
I was. I'm 79.
All right.
31. Thank you very much. Don't look a day over 20s and 31.
So you wouldn't remember...
I remember. Actually, you know what? It's funny. I do remember a lot. I remember growing up really frightened about the time because it was... My parents are both... my dad especially was, kind of left-leaning and stuff, and he's English, so I'd watch it. So we'd kind of follow what was going on in England.
Oh, so he would know about the miners' strike,
exactly.
and Thatcherism, and the Falklands War, and the Red Wedge, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
that was
exactly. And so that, and so I was getting it from him, and then just kind of I've always just been a really The Other Shoe is basically I'm always worried about the worst-case scenario, and there's always the worst thing that's going to happen, and in that case, the worst thing that was going to happen was going to be a nuclear war. And I didn't trust Ronald Reagan, even as a kid. I had a pair of slippers with him on him as a spitting image. Do you remember that TV show where they made puppets? Anyway, they made slippers. And I had a pair of Ronald Reagan slippers, and I hated him. I hated his little face. Rest in peace.
But why did you choose that era?
Because I think that was a really exciting time for culture. We talked about 79, 80, and the birth of DIY, and the birth of punk music, the birth of hip-hop, which... Thankfully, mercifully, on everyone, we did not attempt on this record, or on David's Town.
In the north of England in 1979.
Yeah, there was probably not a lot of hip hop. There was not a huge, vibrant hip hop community. But also, it's just like, historically, it's a really important time because I think that is the death of sort of the old labor. Like that's the end when the unions are being broken, the miners' strike and things like that. And so it's like a bittersweet romantic time. It's like everyone's, a lot of people are politicized. A lot of people are taking action, but at the same time, there's a government in place that is not listening to the people, and is kind of anti a lot of the people in the UK. So it was just like perfect for setting a story. Like wartime is the best time to set a story because when you have nothing left to write about, you can write about the war.
And there was a horrible recession back then.
Horrible recession.
20% interest rates.
And just like strikes all the time in England. There was on the verge of a general strike.
There was a baker's strike. There was a gravedigger's strike. There was a
garbage
nurse's strike, a garbage strike, all more or less at the same time.
Yeah.
And the biggest one was the miners' strike, which broke all the unions that had been in place for decades.
Yeah,
like I think across Great Britain.
And there's also like Harlem County, USA, about the strike in the United States, and there's kind of like parallels. And I'm sure this is going to show my real lack of Canadian history knowledge, but I shouldn't say that. I know my mom was on strike at that time, and there were strikes happening here too, and there were people. Obviously, we had Brian Mulroney kind of coming into power shortly thereafter, and so it was kind of like a shift in Canada as well. But it's just like such a key time, like it's the. I think that's when you finally see sort of Western civilization leave the post-World War II period and enter this whole new period. And it's that period that we're still living in today, I think. Or maybe 9/11 changed it, but this is for my conspiracy book.
ExploreMusic wears English Laundry apparel.